Good evening. I'm Rudy El-Houri, Dean of the School of Architecture. I'm happy to welcome you here tonight for our current lecture. Also, I'd like to thank the AIA for partnering with us in offering 1.5 CEUs for our lectures. Also, I'd like to mention that tonight's lecture qualifies for UM's Green Professionals Building Skill Training Certificate. There is a flyer here on your, at each seat that has more details about this, if you are interested. I'm delighted to introduce tonight's speaker, Lawrence Scarpa. Lawrence Scarpa, principal of Books plus Scarpa Architects, has garnered international recognition for the creative use of conventional materials in unique and unprecedented ways. He is also considered a pioneer and leader in the field of sustainable design. He is the recipient of the Smithsonian Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum Awards in Architecture. And that's one of many, many awards, major 50 actually of them, 50 design awards, including 19 national AIA awards. He was also honored with Lifetime Achievement Awards from Interior Design Magazine and the AIA California Council. Larry's work has been featured in numerous publications and has been exhibited in venues such as the Museum of Contemporary Art, Los Angeles, and the National Building Museum, just to name a couple of important ones. Also, he has appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Very important. He is currently a professor at the University of Southern California and has taught for for actually 2 decades in leading institutions across the country. I should also mention that he's co-founder of the Affordable Housing Design Leadership Institute, a nonprofit organization dedicated to building mixed-use housing and to help develop more sustainable and livable communities. Please join me in welcoming Larry Scarpa.
Thank you. I'm actually from Florida. I grew up just down the road here. I left a really long time ago, but about 3 years ago, we opened an office here in Fort Lauderdale. So any of you students looking for internships or such, look us up. I'm going to start by showing you a couple projects by artists. The one on the left is a German artist named Voth, and the one on the right is Andy Goldsworthy. I don't know a lot about Voth, but we have a fairly steady stream of German interns. I just have this one book in German. So the first thing they have to do is translate 10 pages for me. So I'm learning more, but I don't think you need to really read about his work. If you look at it, you know, you could see it's big, it's bold, it's object-oriented, you know, and as you look at both of these artists' work, you begin to see something unfold that you don't realize. Like in the case of both artists, they go to extreme lengths to actually document the making of their work, or in Goldsworthy's case, the unmaking of it. You could see Voth creating this kind of journey for this large sarcophagus and the snowball, which is really, you begin to wonder, why is it not in the snow? And what you think you knew about the work suddenly begins to change. And, you know, what they're basically telling you, it's about a journey, it's an experience. And even, you know, in the case of Voth, he tows the sarcophagus around, you know, these landscapes, and you know, Goldsworthy's snowball is really a pile of rock. objects. So for each of the artists, the object is really not that important. It's the experience that matters. And so that's kind of what we try to do in our work. We try to leave something behind, whether there's an object there or not. So like you can probably think about it, some of you have a place that's special to you that you remember vividly, in your head, that was a special place. And you go back there to visit it, a decade later or more, and it looks nothing like you remember it. But the memory is there like it was yesterday. And that's kind of what we try to do with our work. That started for us, this was in a film studio that we did, one of the first projects where I started to realize this, and I would carry this ad around in my pocket for these shipping containers where they were just always for sale. And I wasn't really interested in the container itself, but I was more interested in the story embedded within the container. It carried goods from east to west. It really, you go to Long Beach and there are thousands of them. It talks about our, deficit. So there was a story already with the container. And I also thought about something that Robert Venturi said when he said, a familiar thing seen in an unfamiliar way becomes both perceptually old and new at the same time. And so this particular client in Los Angeles, we had these wave of film directors who were becoming really well known. They were almost like sports free agents. And the bigger film studios would offer them a partnership to be a business, and the film studios would do all the business end of things, and they would say, you get to be the creative guy, get a name for your firm, you can get an office, but we want you working in 15 weeks. And so we were one of the only people in Los Angeles that would say, yes, we can do it. And so these projects, the work I'm showing you here, this was done from the time we were hired to when they moved in less than 15 weeks. And so we went and we bought this container, and these are our design drawings, our presentation drawings, and our construction drawings. And we literally did this entire building drawn freehand on 11 by 17 paper. And, so you can see this is typical of one of our drawings, and that's the built product. So for us, the building became a drawing at full scale. And we worked in collaboration with the builder as really a partner. And it changed every day. So, for example, we designed something with a certain beam, and they'd say, we can't get that beam, but we can get this one. And we'd redesign it, and the next day it was built. And so everything became also an existing condition, but we did these kind of amazing things from detailing and finishes that there's no way we could have ever done that if we were to do it in the more traditional way, where we design everything, we draw it, we send it out for bid and get pricing and value engineer. We did all of this really on the fly. And when I finished the work, I thought to myself, this is pretty amazing. This is, it made me think about how I practice architecture, and I started to think about, is there another way for an architect to practice architecture? And so I remember the time when I worked in New York for Paul Rudolph, and my colleagues dragged me up to this place in upstate New York. It's called Opus 40. And that guy right there, Harvey Feit, who was the artist, bought this abandoned bluestone quarry in upstate New York, with the idea that, hey, lots of bluestone, I can build unlimited sculptures. But what he wound up doing was this amazing place. He worked on it for 40 years before he died. And what was so interesting is he went to a place with a preconceived idea of what he was going to do. And 40 years later, he came out with this incredible place, much, much better than the artwork that he was doing. So I looked at other guys like Henry Moore and how they work, and this is one of Henry Moore's drawings for a sculpture he did. And what he would do is he wouldn't make drawings of his sculpture, he made drawings about it. And this was kind of a way to get him in the frame of mind to actually make the work. And so I thought, can I practice more? Can I practice architecture like that and not get sued, basically? So I tested these ideas with my students, and this was a project I did with 8 Woodbury students. In the summertime, we built this project for $3,000, no drawings. We spent 1 week just making some models in different groups. We came up with a few principles that were important to us, and we started building. And so we just kind of took it apart, rebuilt it, and we built this, what I thought was a fantastic project. It's for a nonprofit client of mine. It's a portable construction training center, and it all closes up, but we did it for really inexpensive. We did it super fast and, with no drawings. And it was at that time I was convinced that there's another way for me to practice. And so we made some hires where, I like to say we have a bit of a parallel universe that happens in our office. We do things that interest us that don't really have a beginning or an end while we're still doing traditional projects. So we engage in exercises like this where I was interested in wood and our perception of wood being either an organic thing like a tree or an inert object like a stud to build the building. And I wanted to look at that point where we could see wood as both, in a sense, inert and organic. So we made models, we looked how to broadcast light, we did computer models, steel, it didn't matter, we just were making things. And then we started milling and making these kind of computer drawings. And we formulated an idea which we started to call liquid wood. And right about this time, someone in my office handed me this sheet for a sculpture competition. And I made this little sketch, and I sent it in, and we won. And so now I had to actually make it. So it's a park bench for the city of Santa Monica, and it was kind of a hybrid of, handcrafting and computer modeling. And so we kind of made some of these models as a way to kind of, just get our thoughts together. And then we just started cutting these wood beams and putting them together. And this is it. And when, when I was selected, the city said to me, they liked the project, but they're like, how do people sit on this? And I told them, I said, nobody fits in a chair. It's pretty much tolerable to everyone, but not really comfortable. I said, this gives people an opportunity to sit at different heights, to lean on it, blah, blah, blah. Well, we finally got past it. And, I've been back now to the park several times. just looking to see how people interact with it. And I want to just show you some of the things that happen here. And there are all kinds of, when was the last time you've been to a park and you've seen people playing on the bench? Never. So, and the city told us this has been one of their most successful pieces in the park. And for us, I was very proud of the idea that it was sculpture, but people also wanted to touch it. And I think when people engage in your work, like physically touch, they never forget it. So we kind of continued that study, working with the wood, and along came a client. We remodeled the Frank Gehry building and turned it into edit studios. And I found a cabinet guy making drawer boxes with a CNC machine, and talked to him about this idea. Whereas when we showed it to a contractor, they looked at it and they go, wow, this is going to be really expensive. And they go, that last project we did that cost X, just triple X and we'll make it work. But when you go to the makers, they kind of have a different attitude. They get a bit excited about it. So we went, worked directly with them. The pieces were figured out, numbered, right? Here they are in the shop, all set, numbered, and the contractor just put them up. So this is the wall. You can kind of see these slight cracks in it. Those are actually the doors to the edit studios. And, our client loves it because he tells his clients, go to studio 2, and he points to the wall. And they kind of just feel their way in. But everyone that comes in here touches the wall. They all touch it. And so they, even some of them, I've talked to them because I did a lot of edit studios. They go, oh, you did the one with the wall. They don't remember the name, they don't remember anything, but they remember the wall. And I think it's part because they kind of touch it. So I'm always looking, and what we try to do is not really invent anything. We really just try to reveal things that we know are already there. Like this is a bus shelter that they were painting by my house at like 5 in the morning. And I said, wow, look at the color on that and the light. So when I got to the morning in the office, we started a new exercise. We started looking how light would broadcast through different kinds of materials. And I got, there's marbles, glass, many, many things. I got infatuated with these, what you see is a drawing on the bottom right. These are these 1/8 inch acrylics, which are really, you can find them at any hardware store, and there are thousands of colors. All the colors are ugly. There's not one nice color. And so we started to stack them up to try and just make this beautiful color, but found this kind of richness that occurred by stacking them. And so we put that in midstream in this project. So these are studios that are backlit, that broadcast the colored light through the space. And so we're always looking to, like, light is a big component of what we do, but not just like how light hits a building, but how light kind of comes through a building in a bit of reverse, like how the building actually broadcasts the light, not how it accepts it. So this is a very recent project for a school we just finished, and the perforated screen that wraps the building has a series of courtyards around it, but it also kind of like shows the light. In a way, it's revealing the light to you, where normally you just think of it as something that is out there. This shows what it really does on a particular or materials. And so you get kind of a depth with the light, which I think makes it really interesting. And the same, this is an office building we did in Monterrey, Mexico, with a similar kind of idea. the building. These are performative issues, so it's west-facing, it screens and allows light into the building, like filtered light, but at the same time, the lights return back. So here's the north-facing, and you could, again, you look at it, the reflection that comes through it and the dappled light that comes through it, it's really telling you the story about the light. And at the same time, if you look at where the shadow occurs, there's a lot of glass in this building, but it's always in shadow. And then we allow the north light to come in from the clear stories up above. So when we make these things, we have our offices full of little things that we've made, and they sort of sit around our office with nothing to do. But what tends to happen is we'll have a client come in, we're working on it, and they see, in this case, this little maquette, and they start asking, what is it? And I'll explain to them what we were doing, and before I know it, they're like, I want one of those, And so in this case, this client does prop placement where they give away merchandise to movie people, hoping that someone will take a picture of them wearing their stuff. And so we said, well, why don't we make a dressing room? So we just took this maquette, we blew it up full scale. I had some of my students make this, and we started making it. So we were getting close to finishing the project, and as you can imagine, it's a little hard to put skin around that thing for a dressing room. And my client's calling me, asking, where's the dressing room? We got to have that in there. And I really did not know how to skin this thing. So I started to avoid them. And a couple weeks went on, and I was getting ready to fess up and tell them, I have no idea what to do. And I'm driving home thinking about this, and right on the corner of my street where I, would get my old Volvo repaired, the guy, William Leaf, he's the mechanic, I see a sign on his building, says, "Will shrink wrap anything," and I pulled in, and I said, "William, you do shrink wrap?" And he started laying it on me and telling me how he could shrink wrap everything. So I went back, got that little maquette, brought it to him. He tried to shrink wrap it. A couple days later, I come back, and he was a lot more humbled when I talked to him. And, he started telling me all the problems about it. And we took, we were at the stage, right? So I brought it back to the shop. We made some modifications, and I convinced William to shrink wrap it. So here he is in the space. We did it a bit like a pig on a spit, and they rolled it around and put the skin on it. So here it is in its final format. And, these things you can't really draw. And I'm, we're not like cowboys that just do crazy things without regard, but, there is something to be said for venturing a little bit into the unknown. You find things that you wouldn't otherwise find. And I found that if we bring our clients along, there's a lot of forgiveness if you make a mistake. So we're always looking, what I would say, we look right in front of us to try and see things that we know in a new way. And, like I find these people near our office who have these amazing equipment and do amazing things, and I just go talk to them to see how we can work with them. So this is another project done in the same thing. This is a 15-week project where we would build things off-site with vendors while contractors are building the building or the space. And so these are boardrooms that were done out of rebar and bent tube steel. And, they were all rolled, brought to the site, but then we plastered the building. And I had been thinking about, plaster or stucco, and everyone hates stucco. At least we do, and I know probably South Florida too, hate stucco. In California we hate it too, So I was determined to make it beautiful. And so we came up with this idea of plastering the room, but letting the plaster ooze through the lath. And so I equated a bit to psychoanalysis. It's like, this is inside the wall, but it's never revealed. And so we just try to reveal what we already know is there. And, you get this kind of combination of the rough and the smooth. And again, everyone that comes in this space, the first thing they do is walk up and touch it. And once they touch it, they never forget it. So what I've come to realize is that, there's really a fine line between the peculiar and the beautiful, between fine art and popular culture. And I'm really interested in the area where the two commingle. I'm interested in being, both the teacher and the student, and trying really to find something extraordinary within the ordinary. So I'm going to show you a few things that we've done in that realm. This is an office building in LA. Those are Dixie cups. And this was my first real corporate client. And when I went to the site with him, he kept asking me, what my ideas were. What are you going to do? And he had so many small offices that they wanted to be enclosed, so light was an issue. Light was clearly an issue. And I had this idea of a solar ecliptor, but with Dixie cups. And so somehow he got it out of me, and I said, I'm thinking Dixie cups. And he says, you are not putting Dixie cups in my space. So we went back to the office. I made this little mock-up on the left, and we emailed it over to him, and I get the email back, with the capital wow and all the exclamation points. And he's like, what is it? And he says, I said, it's Dixie cups. And away we went. And, I've been back again over here many times. And one day I walk in and those are all blue cups. Another day they're all green cups, all white cups. The guy who didn't want Dixie cups is now playing with our building. And I think that's great, Ping pong balls, we've used these, but these again are kind of serious exercises for us. I showed you in Edit Studio, we did many of them, and after hearing every single editor say they don't want any light in their Edit Studio, and I'd say, why don't you want light? And it was a glare issue. They couldn't stand the glare on their screen. So what I figured out is that the ping pong balls emit light through them and through the gaps, and it makes the reflection on a computer screen is really just pixelated. So there's no glare. It's almost just seems like a slight reduction in resolution. So, we were making these film studios, light-filled studios, using ping pong balls. And so, you get this kind of not just the light, but the marvelous texture. When you walk in, you see this, and then when people get right up to it, they see that it's ping pong balls, and it heightens their experience because they connect to it, that it's something that they know, that they're familiar with. We've done, this project is affordable housing using recycled crushed can blocks. We work with a local recycler, and I would bet that this is probably the only affordable housing project in the country with Schlitz malt liquor built into the facade. the one using industrial brooms. And what we do is we start out this one just going to the hardware store buying brooms and making mock-ups. And then, we start calling the manufacturer. And after many calls, I think they start worrying, why is this architect calling me repeatedly to know about making brooms, my brooms? And I think they sense industrial espionage. So this guy flew down from Michigan to see what we were doing. And before I knew it, he was designing it for us. And, my client asked me, well, isn't it going to get dirty? So I asked him, isn't it going to get dirty? And he said, oh, no, it's made out of this material. Never dust will get on it. And I just regurgitate that to my client, and they think I'm a genius. So I think, if you talk to people, you learn, and you can see things right in front of you that you don't know are there. We just finished this building for ASOP in downtown LA. It's right on the Fashion District, and we reused the bolts from the fabric that they throw away in the Fashion District. So we hand-picked out, all these basically cardboard tubes, and made the entire store using the cardboard tubes. Even the shelving, all cardboard. That's only a 1/4 inch thick with a little carbon fiber mixed in there. Cabinetry, the whole thing. Fire department loved us. Paper store. So, I'm constantly looking. This is just a market in Mexico City and a picture I took at the Orlando airport of all our beautiful Florida attractions. Neither one of those are spectacular if you pick out the individual piece. In fact, they could be considered quite ugly. But together, like in the collage, they're quite beautiful. I found these women in Southwest Alabama making these quilts in probably the poorest section of our country. No design background, no design training at all, but making these incredible things out of just scraps of cloth. And, I'd say to myself, how can I be that good, and that loose? It's like I even see it with my students. You get an idea, it's a great idea, and then as soon as you start doing it, we seize up, and it gets so rigid. So, I'm looking, how can you aggregate these kind of simple pieces and make it into something loose and free and that interesting. So we got a little project here for the city of Pembroke Pines. It's called their Gateway Sculpture. And, I was thinking about light. I was thinking about the hardwood hammocks here. And, how can you make this light filter, but also make it in a way like the quilt makers in Gee's Bend, and just take these kind of components and assemble them in kind of a loose way, and in a sense, just let it come out. So we wrote this script to, let the project in a way design itself. So we came up with these rules and these kit of parts and, a series of rings, and we ran the program. And we kind of made these, move in the columns and the rings move with it. And we kind of broke it down into these components, not unlike they would do in Gee's Bend, and we built it. We prefabricated this thing. Here it is in the shop. It was made in Denver, shipped out here in pieces. There it is, and then there's the final product. So, I get interested in things like this. It's like just a simple sheet, and it's repeated over and over and over, but it's the variation that happens organically that really makes it fascinating. And so I've been really looking for ways to, how can I make something out of the exact same component and repeat it over and over again, but not be boring, So, I did a school. This has 650 solar panels built into it, and we kind of placed these windows in a way where they were kind of dancing along the facade. There were some windows behind it. They're transparent, so you get a color shift and a light shift, and the windows coming through there. So it's a long facade that kind of dances down the street. And here you see that. And so this kind of idea has been evolving for us. This is a housing project we finished not too long ago, where I was still working with that same idea. How can you make a same exact component and repeat it over the building? But I also really like this artist named Patrick Hughes, who did this series called Prospectivity. And the painting doesn't move. It's just as your perspective moves around it, it kind of appears to move. So we worked with a company, for those architects in the room probably know C.R. Lawrence. They're a big manufacturer of hinges and other things that we've all specified. So I went to him with this idea to make a shutter. And we refined this kind of idea of a shutter for our building, and we repeated it over the entire building. So it's an urban site, really great views to the east and west, but it's on a busy street where you can see in. So the building, in a sense, redesigns itself every day or every hour based on what the resident inside wants. If they want more light, they open it. If they want to be more private, they close it. So the facade, even though it's the same, it changes every day, but it's also performative. And so it's important for us on all our projects that they also become not just for an aesthetic value, but that they're also performative. So in this case, this was about a $300,000 cost to do the skin on the building. And our owner said, well, I want to save some money. Can we just take the skin off the building? And I said, sure, you can do that. And so, he had the contractor price it, removing the skin, and sure enough, he saw $300,000 savings. And then our mechanical engineer said, oh, wait a second, there's a lot more heat gain. We got to change all the windows. We got to add more air. By the time it was all done, it was about a $50,000 difference. And our client said, you mean I can get this for an extra $50,000? And so, we found this is ways to win design. So if you do it simply for what it looks like, you always lose. But if you find a way to make it really part of many things, how it performs, you mostly win. And it's really just a simple idea. There's a very narrow porch, and so it affects the quality of the space inside. It makes it easy for the people use, and you get these sort of wonderful light-filled units that people love being in. And we did some other interesting things. These are the kitchens. We basically went and got a bunch of old skateboards, and we cut them up, and we made all the backsplashes out of recycled skateboards. So whether, as we do bigger projects, our work gets bigger, it gets harder and harder because, a small increment of money winds up being a lot of money. And so we're always looking for ways to do something that we can do well and do with a serious idea, but also make it work and be able to be built. So we're working on this 500-unit housing project, and your typical concrete building is formed in a big square. We looked at how do you shape the slab edge, and then it's really like connecting the dots. So what you get, it's really quite simple. It's a series of slabs and lines that connect, but you get a building that really looks like it's expensive. This is one in LA. It's a 20-story tower, and we're doing the similar idea right down the street here in Fort Lauderdale, using that same thing, a mixed-use building that we're working on right now. So here are some shots of that using that same idea. And then this is another housing project using similar but different idea, so that you get this variety and interest in the building, and really doing it in a quite simple methodology. We just finished this project in Chicago. It's a house, that house right behind the white car, which we took down. And, I was thinking about brick in Chicago, but, most people, the brick, you see the difference between the brick on the front and the side. The bad brick, which is referred to as Chicago common brick, they always put where you don't see it or where it's less visible. So that's kind of the garbage brick, and the nice red brick is on the front. And I thought, I wanted to use the garbage and make it beautiful. So, but I also, when I started looking at the brickyards, I liked the brick more like this than when it was stacked beautiful, and like I find these things like books stacked up where the lines, the vertical lines are all roughly aligned, but it has a sense of movement. So we started to draw bricks of the building. So these are some of our drawings that we made for this, with looking how we could kind of use, the same brick, but rotate them in a way to kind of create not just the pattern, but like movement, a bit like Patrick Hughes would do. So here's, a more refined drawing of that. And we would make models as well. And then, what I'm finding is that the static moments don't really tell the story. So you can see this is the facade of the building as we built it. And as you move past it, the building seems to go from positive to negative. So it's changing even though the building is totally static. So we showed the contractor this, and of course he got scared. Then we met with the mason, and he was a little scared at first too, and then we explained it to him, and he said, "Oh, this is great, this is easy." And then he wanted to design it. It was like every day, "Hey, what about if we do this? What about if we do that?" I'm like, "No, just stick to the plan." And so, we basically showed them how the whole organization of the brick works. It's these columns of brick, away they went. And the horizontal bars are just to stabilize it. They don't really support anything. The bricks are all self-supporting. Here you can see it in the final form. And again, just like the earlier work I showed, it's not about light on the building, it's the building broadcasting the light. And this is a shot that with the light coming through the back side of the facade. And so our client now has been in here for a few months, and he has told me, he said, "Hey, there are a lot of people stop in front of my house." But he said it's really weird because they stop, and then they back up in their car, and then they pull forward, and they like back up. They're like trying to look through the building, and they can't, I don't think they can see through. It's like puzzling them. But, again, here are some shots of that, and the courtyard behind, and here's moving into the building. I'm just going to show you a couple shots of this, not the entire building. That's our fearless owner. And we're just finished up the design for a 600-unit tower in Shenzhen, China, using really a similar thing. So it's a series of fins, the same exact fin over the entire building. They just kind of rotate in this pattern, so you get this building that appears to be kind of moving as you move around it. The video's kind of long, so I'm not showing, but you get the same qualities of the house that I just showed you. So, this is a diagram of a plane taking off and landing, and I forget the airport, but they get a set of coordinates and they all take off and land on the same coordinates. But what's so fascinating to me is the variations of the pattern. Like, if you can imagine this as just a single line going left and right, it would be so boring. But it's like the idea that, they're given the exact same coordinates, and the variation on that makes it super fascinating. So it's like, I'd say, how can you translate something like that into architecture? And, I pulled this out. This was I know, Alan, you probably remember this, a Spirograph. This was a drawing I did as like a little kid. You just stick your pen in the wheel and you make these lines, and it's like, there's no skill really. And this beautiful thing comes out by just simply lines. Same with these like pickup sticks. It's like in the box, they're just so boring, but when you throw them out, it's like, it's mesmerizing, like, to look at them like stacked up. So I started to think, can you make a building just out of lines? So, and, using this idea of ruled surface geometry, you can basically take a line and you can stack it or compose it into these complex forms and create these complex geometries just using lines, straight lines. And as long as the top chord and the bottom chord are the same length, you can do almost any geometry that you want. So we got invited to participate in this competition in Seattle for a big transit project, and this was kind of fresh on my mind. So we made these renderings with that in mind, and we won the competition. It was a design build, guaranteed max design build, so we were teamed with a contractor who put in a price that said he's going to build this project for $53 million. Well, when we won, the contractor freaked out. He's like, oh my God, can we do this thing for $53 million? And then I started showing him my idea with the ruled surface geometry, and he started to really get into it, And so we worked with them. In the end, it wasn't exactly the same, but I started to, also show him these things. This is one of my colleagues at USC who teaches dance, William Forsythe, and he did these improvisational pieces with light, like making space with light and connecting to his body. So I just started making these drawings using the rules, using ruled surface geometry, until we came to something we liked, and then we would test it. So we wrote our own scripts for this, for testing, rationalizing the geometry, and also, the material, what's the most efficient use of materials. And I just put up a couple of these charts just to show you. This chart right here, in a perfect world, that would be like a flat line, which means every piece is exactly identical. Well, this is our first design. There's not, every piece is pretty much unique, which is a disaster for our contractor who has to build it, on a budget. And as we moved along, you could see that line flattening out. And it's a whole series of paradigms that you have to kind of put together and make work. And one thing we didn't take into account was in this competition was that, the minute you introduce an intermediate chord, the ruled surface geometry goes out the window. We work through that within certain tolerances, and I'm just again showing you some of our models and then the technical drawings to make and construct these pieces. And these would go directly to the fabricator, and they would ship them to the site like that, and then they would go in place. And pretty much everything fit. It took a little bit of muscle in some areas, but we went from the architect's drawing to direct fabrication. It worked out. The skin, in the competition, this is what I thought we would do. We would just go buy some shapes that are out there. That didn't work really well. And then we started to look at some other stock shapes that also didn't meet the criteria. So we designed our own extrusion, and I can just show you how this evolved, the shape to meet the most efficient use of materials and span based on what we wanted to design. And that's the final shape. Here it is, extruded, and then testing it, the qualities of how that would work. And that's our happy contractor with 8,000 pieces going out of the shop. It was erected by 4 guys and 2 cherry pickers in 1 week. And here it is. So again, the light keeps coming back, and the space and how the space and light all connect. Our client was a big public transit company who was also quite nervous when we started, but here they are at the happy opening of the project. We're also working on this project and to change scales here before I close out. This is up in the panhandle of Florida. That's basically our site, which looks more or less like this. It's almost 700,000 acres. So just to give you an idea, if you drove it from end to end, it's 21 miles. And, our clients, this is what they call their garbage land, because they already developed the whole coast. This is all inland, but it's spectacular. And they have to conserve a lot of the land. So for them, it's like, how can they build density, but also conserve the land? And they had this idea, what they wanted to do. They found this place in Ocala. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of it before. It's called The Villages. It's this incredible, profitable senior living, and they told us all these great things about it, so I started doing my own research, and this is what I found. That's what The Villages looks like. I mean, how could it be so, so successful, so popular? It's like a horrible suburb. But then I also found this, it's the highest rate of STD in the entire country, seniors. It's like a fantasy place over there. They have all these things to do, but there's really some real good about what's happening there. Like there's almost no cars. The entire place looks like this. No one drives. They get crazy even with their golf carts. It's like, look at these things. but they're building like that, you know? And so we started to kind of think about, you know, what could we do to even enhance that? And we would look at places like a lot of cities in the South, Savannah, Charleston, and how they're organized in blocks and, you know, how they're walkable. So we started to develop these parcel strategies about how we can make these communities more walkable and almost eliminate the cars. So we wound up with a 40 by 40 foot lot, and by the time you aggregate it in a block, it becomes about 20 plus units per acre. And we can make this kind of strategy for these walkable blocks. And each block would have its own park. So there's a series of homes that can fit in the 40 by 40. You can kind of see here's like a typical block with its pocket park that might look something like this. And it's a combination of townhouse, single-family home, and multi-story, low-scale kind of apartments in a very dense kind of configuration. And the parking's shared, the park's shared. So our idea was that each block would have a different kind of park. You know, one could be a vegetable garden, one could be exercise, so that, you know, you get this kind of walking community that might visit different areas. And this is a view of what one of the parks might look like. And one of the townhouse, which, you know, this is a shared wall. This is about a 1,000 square foot unit, which you see here, the porches combined, so it allows them to sit and watch other people, be part with their neighbor. And here you can kind of see the connecting street. And then because of the size, we can also, are able to save a lot of the pines and remove pieces. So it was a lot easier to put our homes down in a way where we could preserve a lot of the land. We're also working on this right now. I'm not going to show you too much of this. This is for the city of Delray Beach. We're doing some prototype affordable houses for them. These are going to be built for $105 a square foot. And so we're doing 20 of them right now. Same kind of idea, small parcels, kind of different models that meet, you know, a whole, I'm not really talking about it here tonight, but a lot of issues about sustainable and environmental design are all incorporated into this. So housing is a big, I think, crisis that we're all facing now. It's getting really expensive. And where I live in Los Angeles, we have 53,000 homeless people. So think about that. That's almost as big as the city where my family lives in Central Florida. In Los Angeles, the voters have approved by more than 70% almost $2 billion to help try and solve the homeless problem in Los Angeles. It's one of the most expensive areas in the country, but what makes it worse is we have the lowest vacancy rate in the entire United States. So the city put out this competition. They're going to give away $4.5 million for people who could show scalable solutions to solve homelessness. This came out earlier or late last year. They just announced the winners 2 weeks ago, and there we are. So we're now working on this idea of doing these scalable housing projects. But we've come up with this idea of making like a kit of parts that can be deployed almost instantaneously. So when we did our proposal, this is kind of what I was thinking about, where like you get an RV and you just drive it, and you park it there and you set up, you plug into the power and the sewer and you're done. And so we try to think of our proposal as being able to be deployed like that. So we have units which are a power module and a water supply and a black water module all built in. So we can just bring modules and with no utilities start housing people. I was hoping we could do something more like this, though, with a little bit more charming than just these regular homes. And so it's really a kit of ideas that is not intended for us to design every project, but it's a system where we leave room for people to design. And, one of the things that we discovered in Los Angeles, 80% of the lots in LA are 50 by 150. And so we took all the areas and we did an analysis and we did all the setbacks, everything, and we designed our module size to fit within every single code in Southern California. And so this can be deployed to every 50 by 150 foot lot in Southern California. So here are some of the just modules that you see there. We have it for, there are a series of service modules, kitchens, bathrooms. It can be housed up to 8 or have it up to 8 beds in a unit, or it can be a small apartment. And then it leaves enough room to where the facade could be, or facades could be designed, and gives about 6 feet total. So you can move it on the site and decide if you want all 6 feet in the front and the back, or split them. And we just kind of show these possibilities for the, what you could do as a designer to those modules, and then the kind of scalable configurations and how it might fit on all of the different sites. So the last thing I'm going to show you here is something I know that most of you are familiar with. This is a big problem that you guys face in South Florida. It's the sunny day flooding, which is occurring more and more here, and it's, as we know, is going to be it continues to be a problem, but is only going to get worse down here. We have an office here now. We've been working on this for about 3 years now. The coast of Florida has changed over time. It always has, but the next 100 years are going to be really like a dramatic shift. So if, based on what projections are showing, this is what Florida could look like in 2100. Now, Miami, you can see, is still pretty dry. When we came here, Miami happens to be one of the high spots. Where our office is in Fort Lauderdale, it's really probably the worst condition. And so we've been hired by the city of Fort Lauderdale to look at this and what we could do, or what the city can do as sea levels rise and climate changes. And it's a really big problem there. So we've been working now for almost 3 years creating for them this kind of toolbox, which is not unlike what we did for the housing project. And we have a huge team of engineers. It's been a long kind of public process about what to do. And this year, later this year, we're actually going to come out with what they call the Design and Construction Manual. So I'm just showing you a couple snippets of what we're doing. It's kind of designed around what we call territories, tactics, and tools. And what it is, it's basically going to show developers and cities what they can do. Again, it's not saying what you must do, but these are the things that you can do. And it's organized in a way where you can actually read it. So it's basically taking a lot of the engineering and scientific data that we've collected and putting it in a format which builders, contractors, architects can read. And I'm, again, just kind of peeling off some of the pages of it, of what this thing is going to look like and like how you use it. So, you know, we have these, they're almost like grids that graphic grids that kind of tie all these pieces together based on the kind of area that you're working with, whether it's coastal, whether it's urban, and then we show all these tools. One thing I did want to show you, we did some studies too for the city of Fort Lauderdale. We just kind of showed on our own. This is the North Beach Village, what it looks like today. And this is with 3 feet of sea rise. They now have almost 30 days a year of sunny day flooding in that area. And so we kind of put together these. I did it with studios in Los Angeles, and my partner who runs the office here did it with his studios at FAU. And, you know, it's really great for all of you out there. It's surprising how much of this is being embraced, because you guys are not really encumbered by the politics and all the things that you can never do. And so new ideas come out, and surprisingly, they gain more acceptance than like if I were to show it, because they see it as some professional guy trying to ram something down their throat. So, you know, we took our students, and our students did all these presentations to the city. This is a lot of their work, showing, you know, here's a reasonable strategy of kind of defending, you know, so this is really how you would start. This is like a 60-year plan of what you could look at, and then this kind of strategic retreat, and then kind of living with the water. It seems like a daunting task, but I don't really think so, you know, and I think if there's a way, you know, nothing's impossible, and I see things like this. This is a camel delivering solar refrigerated vaccines in the desert. You know, it's like, it's you know, who would think that you could do that there? And even this is at my office in LA, the Santa Monica Museum, and they roll the solar panel out every day, you know, like with the cones and everything. I have no idea what it does, but they like roll it out. It's like doing something. And so, you know, I think are good. Like, we tend to be really strong thinkers as architects, but we have a much harder time gaining broad acceptance of some of the things that we do. So I just want to leave you tonight with something that one of our great architectural historians wrote, you know, more than 60 years ago in an essay on architecture and civilization, where he said, quote, "Our architectural development is bound up with the course of our civilization. To the extent that we permit our institutions and organizations to function blindly as our bed is made, so must we lie on it. The future of our civilization depends upon our ability to select and control our heritage from the past, to alter our present attitudes and habits, and to project fresh forms into which our energies may be freely poured. Thank you very much. Okay. Questions? You just have to yell them out if you have one.
I know you have done a lot of work with green building technology. Could you share some of your experience and latest findings in that?
Yeah, I didn't really talk too much about that tonight, but I can tell you this. I believe that a building that is an energy hog that everyone loves is more sustainable than a zero energy building that nobody likes. So you have to win the hearts of people and the rest follows. If you think you can do, sustainability is not a concept for design. I never heard anyone go, hey, isn't my building great? It's ADA accessible. It should just be, we should just do it. It's a matter of ethics. I tend to kind of take advantage of that and express it as a, story about architecture. But we have clients who could care less about it, but they get it anyways. They just don't, know they get it. We did a very large house recently up by Santa Barbara, and these people we did it for were used to a $1,000 water bill every month, and their house was very energy efficient and so forth. And when they moved in, the wife called me up and she was like, I think something's wrong with our house, and I'm like, well, what do you mean? She goes, things are not working. And I said, well, what's not working? She goes, I don't know, but our power bill's only $100 this month. And I go, everything's okay. So I kind of use it as I use it to my design advantage is what I really do, and I always try to just show how it's not just good for the environment, it's good kind of for the pocketbook too. The very first project I did was the first LEED certified project in this country, and it was an affordable housing project. And I remember before I did that, so many architects said, you can't do it, it's too expensive, it gets value engineered. And when we did it, it was those same architects that would come up to me and ask, how did you do it? So it's, if you want to do it, you can do it. It's not that hard. I hope I'm answering your question. It's a whole nother lecture. Maybe you'll have me back to talk about that. Yeah, I mean, there can be that, but it's a lot like, again, the same thing. You could say, you put solar panels on your building, it costs a lot of money to do it, you could do a lot of stuff with that money, but in the long run, you're saving a lot of money. So, I think if you will, I don't even want to call them a sacrifice because, I can just tell from a lot of my colleagues who are architects you might even know here who are a bit miserable with their work, and they say to me, like, man, how do you do that, And like, I was just as a youngster, like you, I was motivated to work towards, there's going to be so many people in your life that are going to tell you what you can't do. Don't listen to them. Okay, that's my advice. Do not listen to them. Okay, you'll regret more what you don't do than what you do. So make some mistakes, lose a little money, get your parents angry at you a little bit. It's not the end of the world, but pursue your dreams. They will come out. You'll be much happier with your life if you do that. And I can just tell you, I see my colleagues who went right into making a bunch of money, and they are doing okay, but I can tell you they'd rather be me than them professionally. Okay. Thank you.